Good evening. Thank you for coming out this evening. My name is Scott Johnson. I'm the chair of the Cape Fear Economic Development Council. You're supposed to be here. I noticed it's supposed to be an economic development forum. We're actually going to do a Pokemon Go. Change that up.
Servers down.
Well, thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight. And I want to thank our presenters this evening. We have Adam Lauber, who's the Chief Financial Officer with Alcami. Our own Mayor, Wilmington Mayor Bill Saffo. And we have Dr. Pat Mitchell, who traveled down from Raleigh to the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And then we have our moderator this evening, our own Jenni Harris, who is currently the Southeastern Regional Industry Manager for Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Jenni is a senior level strategist and advisor who provides strong vision and leadership for business and community development. So a quick note about CFEDC and what we're about. Our mission is to bring together community leaders, industry, and the public to foster collaboration, transparency, inspiration, and alignment around a shared regional vision. Our vision is to foster a thriving community and destination that serves as an exceptional place to live, work, learn, and play. We envision a sustainable and innovative economy that enhances the region's beauty and cultural resources while meeting the needs of an engaged, creative, informed, and generous people. Now, to accomplish that mission and vision, we have a dedicated board. And can I just ask our board to stand up quickly, because they put a lot of time and effort to have this More importantly, if you didn't meet someone or have questions about CFEDC from our board, find someone afterwards. Make sure you sign up on our sign-up sheet. If you'd like to keep up with the activities and what we're doing, we're going to have a social on July 28th for mental and a lot of other activities. So quickly about this forum, economic development, how do we go from good to great? I ran into Jenni Harris about a month ago at one of Jim Roberts' event network for entrepreneurs in Wilmington, and we started talking about this, and we said it's a perfect time, and it's sooner, better sooner than later to come together and talk about this topic of what type of resources do we have at the state and local level. What are we doing? And what are all the economic development organizations? There's probably a lot more than we are aware of, doing a lot of different things. So how do we align? How do we collaborate and take Wilmington to a new level, elevate us? My employer and CEO always has said for probably 50 years that success is never final. And I don't think we have a lot of successes that the mayor's taking us to here, but how do we continue that success, elevate what we're doing? So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jenni, who will be our moderator this evening. If she doesn't tell you, I'll mention it. Please maybe turn your cell phones off and keep those rings off and get the housekeeping out of the way. And Jenni, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the board, and thank you to everyone here for having me, for having our guests. I think, as Scott said, this is a great topic. I wanted to briefly introduce our panelists. You all can get online and read their bios. All of you have access, I'm sure, so I'm not going to go through a whole lot of information about them, but just to tell you why they're here. Introducing them a little bit, but really telling you why they're here. Mayor Bill Saffo, obviously, has been in office since 2003. 1 term as city council and 5 as mayor. He's been here a long time. He's done a lot of good things, and we've all seen it. Those of you who have been here for a while, and those of you that are new have probably heard. He's done a lot of good things. He's been a visionary and a facilitator for an enormous amount of growth in Wilmington, which translates, obviously, into growth for the larger region. Assistant Secretary of the Department of Commerce, Dr. Pat Mitchell, was appointed in 2013 as an Assistant Secretary. She oversees, and I know I'm going to get this wrong because it's a new division, but we'll just make fun, right? She gets chased by bears every day. She oversees the new Rural Economic Development Division, which includes broadband, which includes infrastructure, it includes the Main Street programs and the community development block grants. She oversees all of that, as well as the planners, who are some of my favorite people, believe it or not. When I go into other towns and I see that they need some strategic planning or some help with that, I always refer them to one of her teams. She also has worked in economic development for over 9 years. She's been a county manager, and she's an adjunct professor at both ASU and NC State. So she has a full plate and still came down to do this for us. Adam Lauber is the CFO of Alcami. I hope I say that right. That's formerly AAI Pharma, for those of you that aren't familiar with that. One of Wilmington and North Carolina's largest life sciences businesses. They just went through a change in ownership or merger, and as well as an expansion here. So those of you that missed the ribbon cutting not too long ago, reach out to Adam afterwards. Maybe he'll give you a special tour. But it's fascinating to be over there. Adam's expertise, according to his bio, lies in driving strategic initiatives and managing teams through change, which is very appropriate for our conversation. So, as Scott mentioned, our topic tonight is getting from good to great. Everybody's heard of the book, I'm assuming. But how many of you have been asked? I know that I have asked and I have been asked, what do you love about Wilmington? What brought you to Wilmington? What is your favorite thing about Wilmington? Whether you're a business or you're a visitor or you're a student, but how many of you have been asked that question? Raise your hand. How many of you have actually asked that question of other people? Right, a good number of people. And the answers, I bet, I asked this not too long ago, just to make sure that the answers hadn't changed. They love our quaint historic district. They love our downtown riverfront merchant area, our university or community college programs, all of the cultural offerings, which seem to have increased a lot, probably because of the great arts council that we have, the great restaurants, and as always, the answer is the beaches. We've won awards. I think today we actually were, I don't know if anybody was watching Squawk Box, but we got named the #5 state in the country to do business. We were one of the top states, and I've been watching that all week just to find out where we landed. We landed at #5. So we take pride in our history and our culture, but we have all these other things that go on here, all these other things that we need to take note of from a business perspective. The ports. We have the ports right here in our backyard. We have, I think they told me that we have roughly 30 ships that go in and out of the ports every month. They wouldn't tell me how much money that was, but I wanted to know. We have the airports that, how many of you travel in and out of our airport for business? And some of you even, I think Scott Johnson was just talking about all the travel he does to the airports, and Adam as well. We have global companies here, like Alcami, like PPD, that invest millions of dollars in our region. And our estimated population increase, I just looked this up the other day because it's changed already. In 2010, they estimated that in 2020, we would have an increase of 26,000 people. In 2013 to 2014, they had an increase of 5,000 people just in that 1 year. That's 14 people a day, over 14 people a day, every day, moving it. How many people are in this room? Like 30, 50 people? That's all of us, like in a week. And we've got to put them somewhere. We've got to get them jobs, and we've got to feed them. We've got to do all those things. So until 2040, we're going to continue to have that growth. In Jim Collins' book, which you've all heard, Good to Great, he says, it's not the what, it's the who. That's his #1 point that he makes, getting the right people on the bus. So we have all these great assets. We talk about all these great things about Wilmington. But who's going to take us to the next level? Because it's not the airport that's going to get us to the next level. It's not the courts. It's not the Garner report. It's not all of those things. It's the people. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And first of all, Mayor, I want to start with you and ask you, thank you for being here. What are your thoughts on that? On the fact that it is the people that will take us to the next level and get us beyond being a beach town?
Well, I think the people already get us there. I mean, we're being looked at a lot of different folks around the nation. We're becoming a significant vacation spot in the Carolinas, called the Rivieras of the Carolinas. We've got a lot of people moving here for a lot of different reasons. So the people are taking it. And the sea change that I've seen, because I grew up here, has been dramatic. Some for the good, and some also for the bad. But mostly for the good. And the energy and the new ideas and the demands for different things in the community have been really pushed by a lot of the newcomers that have come into our community. As opposed to, we don't want to spend on this and we don't want to do that. We see a lot more progressive issues that are happening in our community. Who would ever thought we would see a performing arts center 1,600 seats here on 3rd Street, or a Riverwalk that was paid for by the citizens of this community that has become the #1 tourist attraction in the region, and at a pretty significant cost at that. It's the newcomers that have made the dramatic difference. And then, of course, you bring in all the companies that come in, over the years, and the people that have retired here and stayed here, and the retirees that have also moved here. It's been a big boom for our area. But it also creates another set of issues that we have to contend with. Traffic, how we move people around, how we educate people, the money that we're going to spend on policing and fire. You have an added cost of services as you have more population moving to the community. So we as a community are going to struggle with how do we keep this beautiful place without wrecking the place with all these people that are moving here. Because a lot of people that have moved here over the years have come here because of its quaintness, because of its small towns. And people like that. It is changing dramatically, I think. And, when I was growing up here, you came to Wilmington for the beach. Now you begin to see a sea change when people are coming to Wilmington for Wilmington, just like they go to Charleston for Charleston and Savannah for Savannah, and the beaches become secondary. Beaches are important, economic driver, don't get me wrong. They are the things that made our community. But now when you have in tandem the beaches as well as a vibrant city center, it gives you the opportunity to have 12 months out of the year where you have a lot of economic growth and vitality to come to your community. And that's a good thing for everybody. And that also ties in with what's happening in Brunswick County and what's happening in Pender County. Because Brunswick County, I look at from a mayor's perspective, is especially Brunswick Forest, Mallory Creek, Magnolia Greens, all of those neighborhoods over there come to Wilmington a lot more than people maybe in the outlying parts of Indiana County come into the city of Wilmington. I see more of that, especially downtown Wilmington. So it's a good thing for us, for the community.
You can probably speak better than the others about this, but New Hanover County recently completed a target industry analysis for the Barber report, and City Council and the County Commissioners both got together and agreed that they would identify 6 priorities from the report to start on. I know there was just a recent discussion about giving an update on that. So one of those priorities included the creation of a regional marketing strategy to recruit, expand, and start up business in specific industries, such as aviation, life sciences, and food processing. And that was going to be led by the North Carolina Southeast Partnership. If you could gather all the people in the region, all the different organizations in the region, how would you wave your magic wand to get them to collaborate toward that one priority? Well, first of all, if I could do that, I'd be called Lawrence of Arabia. I agree with that we have to come together to do our marketing of the community and of the region, of the area. Whether the economic development groups that are currently on the ground, are they the ones to do that? I don't know. What I do think, and I'm a strong advocate of, and believe very strongly in, is in the 21 points that the Garden report came out with, one of them was to create an economic development fund that needs to be shared with the community to see if they would get behind passing a quarter-cent sales tax that would be used specifically for economic development purposes, whether it be marketing, incentives, whatever the case is. Primarily controlled and operated by the elected officials that you folks put into office. I think that's the only way we're going to be able to get there. We can have all these discussions and panel discussions and meetings upon meetings, but every board, every executive director has its own thought processes, and trying to work with them. I mean, they're going to be cordial, they're going to be nice, they're going to agree with us, they're going to and they're going to continue to do the same thing that they've always done. So I think that if we want to move forward as a community with one voice, with one group, with one organization, I think you're going to have economic development fund that's created for that particular group.
Other than that, it's going to be a very tall order to get everybody in the same room. And I've just been sitting here for 12 years, so I can say that because I've had the opportunity to sit in a lot of meetings, more than you folks can even imagine, listening to a lot of stuff. And look, they're all great groups, and they all do specific things, and they do it good. But to speak with one voice, it's going to be a very tough thing.
So would you envision those funds being accessible to the number of group economic development groups?
Possibly. I think that would be something that the city council and the county commissioners would have to jointly agree upon. But I think that if it is brought before the voters and explained thoroughly as to how they're going to use these economic development funds, I think it could be done. I mean, there's a litany of things that you could use it for. I know that we deal with companies that are looking for incentives. Could you incentivize a company locally? I think you could with that one. Could you do some beach renourishment? Absolutely. Could you use it for marketing purposes? Absolutely, because this thing could possibly generate up to about $9 million a year. So that's a significant pot of money. But I think it should be controlled by the elected officials that are the ones that have to answer to the public as to how they use that money. So as long as it's explained, it's thoroughly reviewed, I think that's the way we should go in the future if we want to speak with one voice.
If I can ask one more question on that, would that be something that would be considered to be a public-private partnership funding, or to get the private side involved in that as well?
I think it's important to get the private side to buy into the concept. And I think with that kind of a significant investment, they would. I mean, and you can do some really good things with them, great things with them. But here again, there's a lot of discussion needs to happen. Obviously, it was one of the recommendations that I really believe that we're missing on, that we really need to focus on. I know we've got a lot of things on our plate right now, but I think it's something that I would like to at least have a discussion with the county commissioners and their board and our board, all always here with our board, and see if there's a way we can move forward with it. But it obviously would be up to the voters of this community whether they want to support it or not. And I think that every part of the community should get something out of it, because I know the beach community is going to be concerned about beach environment. That's the thing that probably keeps them awake at night. How do we nourish these beaches? If we have funding from the federal and possibly the state level, we can leave it or disappear. How do you find these beaches that are huge economic drivers for this community and for this region? So, that's. I think they would, I think, buy into it if they knew they were going to get something out of it. But I don't think you can just say Wilmington, Uintah County, and that's it. I mean, all the beaches are part of Uintah County, but we're all part of the county.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Matt, from from your point of view, from the state perspective, from the perspective of being the county manager, how would you accomplish the same task, pulling all of the different groups of people together and waving your magic wand, which would be some sort of fancier wand, princess wand? How would you do it? Is there anything that you would do differently?
First, let me say I like the mayor's ideas, and I want to comment on your economic development. This is one of the days as a local developer and the county manager up in the mountains. The first year that I went to Ashe County as a developer, which was in December of '04, I had going through the budget season just a few months after I got there. I asked the commissioners for a penny on the property tax dollar to put into an economic development capital reserve. Now, I knew I wouldn't get a penny because they'd feel good about cutting me, but every year that I was there when I asked for a penny, I got half a penny. Now, in Ashe County at the time, over a period of, I guess, 8 years or so, we had about $1 million in that fund. Certainly not anything like you're raising, but a much smaller community. The benefit of that, which the commissioners did not know at the time, that once you put it into a capital reserve fund for a purpose, you can't take it out to balance your budget. And there were a couple of times they wanted to do that, and they couldn't do that, but they got okay with that. But what that allows you to do, like the mayor is saying, you've got some money there that's already dedicated. The community understands what you're doing with it, and you've got a fund there, whether it's incentives or, you know, however you're going to use that money. Excellent idea. The communities that I have worked in, there have been many groups, perhaps not as many as you have here, all with an economic development function. And at times they're all going to get along, and there's going to be times they're not going to get along. And I don't think there's any one way to get everybody on the same page. And what that takes, to the extent that you can, is good leadership. And when you look at, I met the city manager earlier and now the mayor, you've got some great tenure there in your political leadership. And if you have stable political leadership in a community, it says a great deal to businesses that are looking at your community. I guarantee you, they look at that, whether they ever discuss it with you or not. One of the things with business coming into a community, they want to know what that political leadership is. Is it stable? Because that's where your local policies are coming from, out of those elected boards, be it councilor or be it the county boards. I think that there has to be an attempt from all groups to occasionally get together, whether it's in a setting like this, whether you have roundtables, whether you have another organization that's a representative from each of those organizations, so individuals know what other organizations are doing. It's perfect, in my opinion, it's perfectly okay for groups that are working in economic and community development not to be focusing on the same thing, because we all have our own passions, we all have what we want to do and what we're interested in. But at some point, if you're really interested in your community, you're going to come together, you're going to have those conversations and find where those areas are, where those issues are, where you really can collaborate and spend your time together. This fund might be a good way to do that.
So Adam, on to you, so you don't feel like you're sitting down there. We know that industry is what creates jobs and investment, and that there are factors that contribute to industries coming here or expanding here or starting up here. Those factors that Wilmington has number 5 in the country for the state to do business. You all just did an expansion here. Alcami just did an expansion here. And so you're one company that came here, you grew here, and now just this recent announcement. What drove the desire for Alcami, for the leadership at Alcami, to grow here in Wilmington?
Well, first, thanks for having us. I think I'm honored to be a part of the panel here, and pleased to see a council like this that takes up these issues. I think that's important to do. From Alcami's perspective, so we combined companies, AI Pharmonic, a company called Cambridge Major Laboratories, which was based out of Germantown, Wisconsin. That took place in late 2013. And then in the last 6 to 9 months, we started a fairly significant expansion, about 5,000 square feet of laboratory space. So fairly high-paying degree chemists, analysts doing science and analytical development here in Wilmington. It's probably about a $5 to $7 million investment, and we expect that to generate between 40 to 50 jobs in the next 3 to 5 years. What was a catalyst to doing that is you can imagine the contrast between trying to bring somebody down to Wilmington versus Germantown, Wisconsin. I mean, geographically, there's a carrot there. Especially if you show them the plant in mid-February. There's certainly a geographic incentive there. I think when we were also looking at where are we going to expand our administrative headquarters, which both the state, city, and county came to the table with incentives. I think over $500,000 of funding, contingent on job growth. Certainly that came into play. I think if you look at the local universities that are right in your backyard, they're reaching out, they're talking about how can we work with you to tailor a curriculum to the life sciences. GMP and FDA regulated industries are not common to find. And specifically, we have someplace like Raleigh, Durham, 2 hours away. most people want to flock to the triangle, right? So it's difficult to pull people down here for that specific. So we find ourselves training a lot and spending a lot of dollars training. A university to come out and put themselves up there to help with the curriculum, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. So it's probably a combination of geography, incentives from the local and state governments, and the reputation of the schools and curriculum development.
So then what is Alcami's next step for growth? What is it that you're getting ready to do next?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you can share.
Sure.
And what do you need from this region to get to that level?
Well, to address the first thing, what's our next step? So we have a fairly significant growth path plan. We've been growing, our portfolio of business has been growing at about 12.5% year over year for the last 3 to 4 years, which is significant. We are going to outstrip our facility, even with this new expansion, I'd say in about 18 to 24 months. So this year alone, we've added in Wilmington, I think it's almost 60 jobs through June. That's, you know, if 5,000 square feet adds 50, I mean, we're square footage fairly quickly. Now that's across several campuses. We have a oral drug manufacturing, we have packaging, and we have analytical development services, all within a mile radius. Our next growth plan is to basically expand our tech center, move all the administrative offices out of that building into a new administrative building, our global headquarters, which would be still on Scientific Park Drive there, and backfill those administrative offices with laboratory space. We're also knee-deep in trying to become compliant with the packaging serialization regulation that came out of the pharma industry. So it's a $3+ million investment. So there's a handful of things that are going on, and it's not just in Wilmington, it's across various of our sites. St. Louis, a new facility in Germantown, we're putting new equipment in. Each of the states are coming to the table with incentives, and I think Wilmington and the state of North Carolina has done a good job doing the same. And I'd say that's fairly compelling. There have been outliers that have been really, really enticing, but Wilmington on par has been a great city to partner with, particularly when you get the county and the city working together and putting together an aligned package. It makes life a lot easier. And I think that's a benefit as well.
So is that something that you're going to be looking for again going forward? I know when you get, I don't know the parameters of what package that you receive, but once you have some incentives, until that time frame is over, there's fewer incentives. The next round of ask, I don't know how to word that exactly, but what else are you looking for from the region? You mentioned the university, which is great, that they're reaching out to help with training and things like that. What other things are you looking for from the region?
With the amount of hiring that we're doing, if you think about the cost of bringing somebody into the city, and at let's say a fairly high-paying job, $100,000 to be a round number, right? You're normally paying a headhunter or a recruiting firm 25–30% of the person's salary first year to find the person, and then you're going to relocate them, maybe $10–15,000. Before you know it, you're looking at $50,000 to get somebody into the business. It's a really expensive thing to do. I think a funnel from the university, right? A degree program, we can cut that cost, or even a network, a recruiting arm of the economic development, where they partner with local community colleges, institutions, or various areas to help funnel, and that could be even a revenue generating source, right? You could charge us $10 grand instead of $50 grand to bring somebody in, and businesses would pay it very easily, right? It'd be a recruiting arm of the agency. That, but also training and development. There's some very acute and specific job skills that are needed that you're not going to get in a degree program. So that takes time, 3 to 6 months to get somebody able to do the job effectively on site. And so I think funding for that sort of thing would be very helpful.
So Dr. Pat, because I know that you probably have a couple of recommendations for him. Knowing this about Alcami, what can you recommend to him from the state side? And then Mayor, I want to ask you too, what would you recommend to him? And not just Alcami, but really based on from the private industry and the things that he said, what can you recommend from the local side?
Okay, Adam said something that I think is significant, and it also is significant for the conversations where you were asking about groups working together. So first let me say this as a local developer and my county management days. I have never met an incentive that I don't like. They need to, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, they need to be used responsibly and they need to be performance-based, but incentives are an investment in your community. Yes, it may benefit one company, but it is an investment of elected officials, whether it's local or state, into a community. Now, Adam mentioned 3 things when he was giving his answer. He mentioned about the importance of the university, the education component. He mentioned about the, the incentives and what the town and the county had done, the community had done on incentives. And obviously, he's in the business world. The 3 most important entities that need to meet regularly in a community, in these groups, various economic development groups, I think need to be aware of this and focus on it and make sure they're inclusive of that, is the government sector, the business sector, and the education sector in a community. Because if those 3 entities aren't working together to serve people like Adam, I guarantee you the job isn't going to be done. And it can't be, at least to be as effective, if it's haphazard. And by that I mean if government is out there talking to, Adam's company, and they do their thing, and, there's other business interests, and then the university comes in. What if all those people are at the table together so they can do a coordinated effort in really meeting the needs, listening to that business, what are your needs, and also letting Adam or other businesses listen to, okay, these are constraints we're working under. How can we meet those constraints, get past those constraints? Because at the end of the day, it's all about capital investment and jobs, because that's where our tax revenues are coming from. That's where our quality employment is coming from. And those entities have got to work together to satisfy people, businesses like Adam's. And Mayor, I bet you agree with some of that.
100%. I agree with you. You have to have performance-based incentives. And our incentive program is very conservative. It's, you get an incentive to create a lot of jobs and you make a significant investment in the community. And you don't get a dime of that money until you've made that investment and until we can qualify that you've hired the people that you, as a company, have said you're going to employ. In the case of PBD, I'll give you a good example of that. I think when we did the incentive package with them back in 2005, they didn't get paid their incentive until about 2012 or 13. So that significant investment had to be made. All those people had to move back downtown. And for all intents and purposes, I think it helped in a lot of the transformation of downtown. But that's a good example of one that was performance-based. You can go around this community and just like what you folks have done out there on 23rd Street, what Lauber Bank and Casino has done, and there's been times where the city has offered incentives. The company took the incentive, or said that they would do it, and for one reason or another, it didn't materialize, and that money was never given. And a good example of that is Corning. Corning built a significant addition to their plant back when fiber optics was going through the roof back in 2001, 2002. There was a significant incentive that was going to be given by the city and the county. They agreed to it. The fiber optics went to a hole. They never even turned on the plant. they never receive the incentive. And that's a good example of performance-based. And if they're used properly, they can generate a lot of jobs, can bring a significant amount of investment to your community, and really transform your community and your region. And I'm going to give you a good example of that, because I was just down in Charleston back in September and October, had an opportunity to talk to the economic development folks down there, the mayor. And if you look at what's happening in the Charleston area with Boeing, with Volvo, and with Mercedes, all three of those were incentive packages given by the state of South Carolina to the tune of almost $1 billion. $300 million for Boeing, $205 million for Volvo. Mercedes was somewhere close to $200 million. And in addition to that, they also made a significant commitment and investment in the port of Charleston and deepening that port to the depth that they're going to need to bring in the bigger ships to transport a lot of this equipment and stuff out of it. That's another $300 million. That's almost $1 billion of state incentive in the area of Charleston, which translated to thousands of jobs. Boeing alone would employ over 7,000 people in that area, and then the residual business that's created because of that. So if they're used properly, you can make a significant dent in unemployment and continue to employ a lot of people, and some with lower paying skills and some with higher paying skills. So everybody can get a job. And some of these incentives that we look at, you have to have a pretty good degree and a specific type of degree, whether it be in chemistry or finance or what have you. But you also have to look at ways that you can employ large masses of people that may not have the opportunity to get those kinds of degrees also. But that's just as important to me as a leader of the community, because if that person doesn't have a job, I'm going to be dealing with them in some way, shape, or form in another part of the community. And I don't want to go there, because the amount of money that we're spending on policing is very high. So,
you bring up a good point about the educational component. So in New Hanover County, we have high schools. You know, high schools have been going through the transition of having a specialty focus area. And I don't know if that was something, I don't know how long that's been discussed, but New Hanover has the Lyceum program. Lane High School has the STEM IT focus. Ashley has the Marine Science Academy, and I'm not sure what they're going to do with Harvard. But so the high schools seem to be focusing on the careers from the high school perspective. What about K-8? And what about, well, we talked about the university a little bit, and the community college, but what about K-8? What role do they play when you're talking about a pipeline of the potential employees on all different levels?
well, as a mayor of the city, I want to see all my schools, all the schools in our community, in my area. And I think when you have schools in your community that are failing or are struggling, we as a community need to find out what the issue is, and if we have to bring additional resources to help those kids be successful, because we've gone basically to a neighborhood schools concept today, then we need to do it, and we should do it, because it's a crime to allow a person to go all the way through school and graduate without the skills necessary to get a job. Because here again, we're going to be dealing with them in another form if we don't. So education to me is critically important. It's been a critical component of the state for decades, and it should continue to be a critical thing for all of us to look at. And we need to analyze these schools, because even though as a mayor, I'm not specifically tied into the school board, I am in some way, because those schools are within my jurisdiction. And what happens in those schools and the education of those kids are very important to all of us. So, you know, we need to focus on those schools that are struggling and see what we can do to bring additional resources. And we can do that sometimes in the private sector. When we can reach out. We've reached out on specific schools in the community, like in D.C. Virgo, where we've gone to companies like PPD and others that have donated generously for additional resources so that school could have iPads or whatever they need to be successful, so those kids can be successful. And making sure that we have good quality teachers in those schools that are teaching, that are dealing with sometimes very tough issues that those kids are going through that other parts of the community don't have to deal with. So I think, to me, that's very important. And then the other thing that we've been talking about as a community is the vocational school or vocational high school. There's a lot of kids that want to do other things, and they're interested in doing other things. And in this world where you can do about anything you want to, it kind of fascinated me when I was going to school, this is what you did. But today you have options. And a lot of kids that are talented with their hands and their minds may want to be a car mechanic, or we always say the proverbial plumber, which they do make a lot of money if you have a plumber in your house. Electrician. I mean, there's a lot of trades out there that these kids can be trained in, should be trained in, so that if they're not going to go to a four-year school, they have a trade that they can fall back on and be successful in some way, shape, or form, whether it be here or somewhere else.
May I add on to that? We have just finished at the state level what was our 21st Governor McCrory's NC Competes for Jobs tour. 21 of these, we did all 100 counties. It was about a 2.5 hour presentation. We started, I think, mid-March and finished in Boone about 3 weeks ago. And the NC Competes, and the way it was set up, Secretary Scavara did the opening. Assistant Secretary Will Collins, who is Workforce Development for the state, and myself, with the various grant programs I have, did presentations on what we're doing in commerce and how we're trying to help communities. In Secretary Collins' Assistant Secretary Collins' area in the workforce, the state is doing a great deal of work and working in communities with career pathways, which are going to go down into the middle school. And so companies like Adams, we realize at the state level, he can't wait until a kid graduates from high school or from community college, and then gosh, we should be, training them in some way. And you mentioned the trades, very, very important for a lot of our students. And so communities across the state are getting the benefit of some of the new workforce development programs we're doing through Commerce, so that we can get into these career pathways and get down into the middle school. And while it will certainly not benefit Wilmington, because workforce development is an initiative and an interest of the governors, I serve on the Appalachian Regional Commission, which is a 13-state, federal-state partnership. I'm the governor's alternate on it. And the ARC serves 29 counties in western North Carolina. We have some flexibility with the grant funding we get, usually about $3 million a year, federal funds we get, to grant out in those 29 counties. And we always try to match up with the governor's, what his interests are, what his initiative is. And again, big workforce. We're working with 3 community colleges now, and we've got some grant money that we can award these colleges. And we're focusing on if they will work with their local high schools and middle schools, putting this grant money into career pathways, so that these colleges, community colleges, and some of the programming and the training they're doing, get it down into that middle school level. Because the earlier we can reach kids with what careers can be, whether it be the trades, whether it be STEM education, or whether it be some other form of training, the earlier we can get them, we think, the better employees we can get down there to the Adams of the world.
I don't think you can overestimate the impact that schools have on recruiting, right? In employment for spouses and just general quality of life. But every employee that I've recruited, if they have kids, the first question they ask, how are your schools? And that's a huge motivation.
Okay, I want to also talk about nonprofit groups and the non-traditional economic development groups. The USW Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the other incubators, the small business centers, the NGOs, groups like Paper Economic Development Council and Focus and EDPNC. There's a million different, well, there's not a million, I think there's about 81,000 though. But there are, one time I heard a statistic that said that there were over 900 nonprofit groups just in our Tri-County area. And I think that one count not too long ago, there were about 29 either directly or indirectly associated economic development groups. So how can those organizations, and I'm going to point this to you first, sorry, How can those organizations become an effective part of the conversation? You mentioned earlier, and it was a great point, everybody doesn't need to focus on the same thing. But how do you recommend, or can you give an example of a town or a group that you've worked with where you've seen those organizations play a pivotal role in the success of a region?
I'll give an example from my home county up in Ashe. And if you've ever been to West Jefferson, North Carolina, it is a charming little town. Jim, I imagine you've been there. A charming little town that's doing very well right now because 3 very progressive managers over about a 12-year period just kept working the plan. But everyone in West Jefferson doesn't always get along. And so the Downtown Business Association, which was a nonprofit, could get along for a while, and then they didn't get along so well. They kind of split up, and then there's the West Jefferson Business Partnership, and they got along for a while, and some people from Downtown Business joined them, and then they sort of got mad at each other, and they fell out with each other. And then the Arts Council came along, wonderful Arts Council in West Jefferson, and smoothed a lot of feathers and got a lot of artwork done in downtown West Jefferson. And the county comes along and hires me as the first economic developer, and I have a county manager that says, Pat, you do not go into the towns and work unless you're invited in. That's a different political jurisdiction. Well, one town wanted me and another town didn't want me. So that sort of thing. If you're going to pay attention to all of the sometimes squabbles, you're never going to get anything done. But if you recognize, sometimes people get along, sometimes they don't get along, but if you truly care about your community, you're going to find ways to get along, to keep the momentum, and get things done. And I think that is very important. So whether you have a West Jefferson that has 1,400 people and maybe 4 or 5 nonprofits that are trying to do some economic development work, or if you have a city like Wilmington with lots of nonprofits, you have to have those lines of communication open. You have to consider that sometimes you're going to agree and sometimes you aren't going to disagree, and you're going to have to respect each other's work. The Arts Council, obviously, was only interested in art, but they were also interested in what downtown West Jefferson looked like. West Jefferson Partnership wanted to build a farmer's market, and they really didn't care what the Arts Council thought about that. But if you truly focus on the community, and you have the right leaders in place, and it takes leadership, whether it's your political leadership, or whether it's the leadership of the group, of the individuals that work with those groups. It takes leadership, and every single person, in my opinion, that is working in a community cares about that community and is passionate to get that community moving forward is a leader. Whether you're in front of the organization or not, you are a leader. And if you are a leader, you have, and I will say this absolutely definitely, not just my opinion, if you are a leader, you have the responsibility to mentor other leaders. You have to do that, whether it's a young person in the crowd, whether it's an older person, whomever it is, and whether you do that because of the example that you demonstrate in the way you work in your groups, or whether it is you're going to spend time with an individual because you see potential in that individual. Every one of us that works in a community wants a community to thrive, has the responsibility to mentor and to develop other leaders. And if you're not doing that, I would question whether you're a true leader.
I don't know whether anyone else thinks of that, but I love it. Adam, from the private industry perspective, what message are we sending as a community to businesses to come here?
I mean, I think it's a positive message for sure. Seeing the city, county, and state all come to the door with packages for an expansion program, that sends a signal in and of itself, regardless of the dollar amount, right? I think just engaging in that discussion is the first step. And, I'll say relative to the other states that we're in, I think Wilmington has done a pretty good job in terms of structuring the deal. As Mayor said, having it, there's strings attached, but there's a carrot at the end of that. you don't get any audit, there's no evidence of, you know, job creation or investment, you get concerned about how are the funds being allocated elsewhere. And so I think it's a delicate balancing thing, and I think the city's done a good job with that. You know, the state, if we go a little bit more broad in terms of the tax rates, they're aggressive. And I think, you know, other areas to think about, particularly for the life sciences, are the R&D credits and the industry-specific, you know, tax implications and things like that. But generally speaking, I think the message is good. It could be stronger. I think there's other cities, other states that are probably marketing themselves a little bit more loudly, but I think that's more form than substance in a lot of cases.
You mentioned earlier the other factors, the weather, the trailing spouse, the education. What about those messages? Do you, if you look at it, you know, kind of step back and look at it overall, not just the incentive packages, but the message overall, is it consistent? Is it fragmented? Is it better? And from what, and in what way? If you say marketing, other places are marketing themselves better, are there areas in there that we need to make sure we're including in our marketing message?
I think it's a lot of times the marketing does fall on the company, right? The state doesn't reach out to prospective employees but I think it has been, in terms of, you know, the industry and the trailing spouse finding a job, I think that's been a little bit difficult because it has a limitation. It has to be reached out, like it or not. I came here with that expectation, and then I'm like, GP's here, Corning's here, PPD's here. There's a lot more in industry than I think the reputation gives it credit for. So I think in that respect, there's probably some work that we can do in terms of broadcasting all of the industry and businesses that are coming to the city.
So thank you for that. So then how can Alcami help us send that message? How can you all contribute to our messaging and marketing to other companies?
You know, I think one area, and I said, I think at the beginning of your privilege to this, is that the airport's not going to make the change. But in a lot of senses, the airport plays a huge role because everyone who comes to the city comes through that little tiny one corridor airport. And it's beautiful. I love it. I flew it today. And we advertise there because we know that. And we see the foot traffic that comes through there. But it's also reaching out to the cities that are partnering, such as Raleigh or Durham, and building relationships with those connecting cities to let them know we're a stone's throw away, right? Tactically, that's what we're trying to do as a business. We have a very small footprint in Raleigh, and we continue to market ourselves as having headquarters down here. We're right next door. I think that sort of same approach can be done at the government level. But I think the airport and finding other connections to major metropolis areas right now, it's Atlanta, Charlotte, you know, finding Chicago, finding other major hubs that we can get a foot into might, you know, draw that sort of connection.
So Mayor Saffo, we have, Adam was just talking about some of the things that he just mentioning, the other companies that are here, that we might not be including in our messaging. We have more here than we say that we have. I actually kind of like that concept. That's something to work on. So how do we spread the word? How do we spread that word? And how do we use the people that we have here to spread that message?
I think that's where you need an overall marketing plan for the region, for the city. And then in particular, what do you want to recruit? I mean, I know the Garden report has come out with some recommendations and targeted industries that we should be taking a look at. And then who's going to take the lead in going after those particular businesses? I'm going back to what the original question is, the message that we are sending out to the internet. I think when company's looking at a particular area, they may be looking at this area for a lot of different reasons. And some of those reasons we'll never know. Obviously, the people that do economic development, you know, deal with folks all the time. They may be looking at us for our natural resources. There may be a natural resource somewhere here that they want to extract. They may be here for a particular water source, logistics issues. There's a litany of things that the company will take a look at. But once they make a decision on a particular area and they put it in that area, there's going to be some specific things they're going to check off on that list. Quality of the education, quality of the work, and how easy it is to recruit somebody to the area, or hire somebody, if you lose somebody, trailing spouse into direct flights to different parts of the world, how do you get your product out of the community, the state, do you ship it out, do you mail it out, do you truck it out? There's a lot of things that go into this stuff. I think one of the things that we as a community, and just going back through what happened with Titan, what happened with Hugo U, and these are two businesses that we're thinking about locating here that created a lot of angst in the community, and I was a member of city council and of course mayor, is, at least from what I can gather, the community is very concerned about the environmental quality of the area. Saying that, company that wants to come here also has to clear certain hurdles, state and federal regulations and local regulations. And if a company, if a property is zoned that way, sometimes we get blamed for it. It says, well, we don't want to be no matter what. If they clear those hurdles, by right, they have a right to be here, whether you like it or not. I think as a community, from an economic development recruiting point of view, I think we, and I've been saying this for quite some time, have to make a determination as to the types of companies that we want to locate here. And if they are high-tech, if they are going to be higher-paying jobs, what it's going to take to bring those types of companies here, because they have a litany of things that they want to have in place. Because I can tell you, when I talk to the mayor of Raleigh, she's competing with the mayor of Austin, Texas, which is another great dynamic city, where somebody that may want to think about moving here is going to Charleston, South Carolina, or our great film industry that a lot of it is going down to Georgia. So they are looking, and they're looking for specific things, but we as a community, I have to speak with one voice as to exactly, not exactly, but to determine what do we want. I can tell you, I know the community is going to grow with retirees because it's a great place. I know it's going to grow with tourism because it's one of our mainstay industries. But we're going to struggle like possibly Asheville does in recruiting companies there that will employ large amounts of people. That brings me back to the nonprofits and to the Entrepreneur Center of the Entrepreneurs. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, you know entrepreneurs are a little bit wacky. They're gamblers. They're risk takers. They take a chance. I mean, they come out there and they say, this is what I've made, this is what I want to do, now I've got to go out here and try to find the capital to do that. Whether you're making gadgets or whether you're developing a piece of property somewhere, you've got to go take the risk and borrow the money. These people can't be shoehorned with one particular organization. They may work real well over here by themselves, or they may work real well with that guy over there who's got a keg in the office. I don't know. But it's a different way that we work with people today, and people work with each other. And you know, from my perspective, and if you go to Palo Alto and you go to some of these other parts of the country, there's a lot of incubators out there. It's not one or two or three. There may be 100, 200, 300. But if one job, if one company is created out of that incubator into that region, it could be a sea change. And just think about what BPD, little BPD over here started with about a 20-person firm right here in Wilmington, right here in the emergency building, or over here in the County Exchange. And look what's happened. Same thing with Cancer Beach. Small company that moved into this town from Canada. And look what's happened over there. From my perspective, the more the merrier. And understanding the balkanization of all these different nonprofits and everything. Look, when somebody, especially in the nonprofit world, when somebody creates a nonprofit, they're doing it because they have some kind of faith or something has told them to do this. And no matter what you do, whether they're underfunded or not, they're hell-bent, they're going to do it. Some of them do very well, and we have to go through a litany of things to appraise them, to make sure that they can do the things that we want as a community and as a city. And they do a lot of good work out there. A lot of nonprofits do a lot of work in this community day in and day out. And there are some that can go by the wayside because they can't get the funding or the financing. But from an economic development point of view, the three specific ones that we fund, Wilmington Business Development, that Scott and his crew out there by the airport, I kind of say hunt the bigger game out there. They're looking for the bigger companies that can have a larger impact. And they do their niche and they do it very well. And they've done a very good job over the years. Then you've got Ed over here with his organization, Wilmington Downtown, that's specifically focused on revitalizing downtown. Hopefully advocating for issues that the city wants to move forward with, and hopefully the city council advocating for issues that him and his team want down there. Business ideas and rules and regulations that we may have on the books that are no longer needed or need to be changed or altered. I expect for him to bring those ideas and thoughts to us, say, you know, this is what needs to be changed if you want this to be revitalized. And then, of course, what Johnny's doing out there on 23rd Street with the Film Commission, which, by the way, if it wasn't for this local film commission, and I'll stand in front of anybody and say this, there would be a film industry in the state of North Carolina, because that film commission and his leadership and the board there, working together with the state of North Carolina and our local legislatures, got at least a grant of $60 million for 2 years that has helped save the film industry for the time being in this state. And it was that film commission that did it. All the other film commissions can say what they want to, and all these other folks that are getting films in Charlotte and Asheville, that's great. But it was this film commission that put up the money, the time, and the money to really get out there and make it happen. So I've seen some significant improvement because of these three organizations that we specifically fund. But even with the CIE, and I want to give it a shot, even I think their whole concept was to be higher paying jobs with high tech jobs, understanding some of the pitfalls of that. Speaking to Jim Roberts back there that used to be executive director, I think venture capital is very difficult to acquire here in Wilmington, and a lot of these companies that may want to do business here are having to go to the Triangle or other places to find that capital, which is going to be one of the tough things that we have to deal with. I'm for any kind of organization that's going to create a job, because a job is a job is a job, and it really helps the entire community out. So you can tell I'm passionate about doing this great job. Whether you're selling T-shirts or whether you're over here doing some kind of diagnostic test on drugs.
We have a couple of nonprofit groups, Frankie Roberts and the Reentry Program.
Sure.
Atiba Johnson and the Oops Foundation, Travis Corpenning and his minority male mentorship. I know I'm going to probably get that wrong. I hope he's not here listening. But those groups that are nonprofits that also help train and get people ready, even if it's soft skills, not so much customized training, but soft skills, getting them ready for the workforce. What resources do they have locally that can help get them into a company like Alcami? Either one of you can answer that question. And Dr. Pat, do you know places that have had success with programs like that?
I will say that the last year with the city, and this is, we heard this from the community, that a lot of these kids needed summer jobs. And we started a very small jobs program. I think it was 12 kids in the first year. I think we moved it up to 70 with some federal funding and what have you. That, to me, is the gateway so that these kids can get some semblance of what it's like to go to work every day, earn a paycheck, what it takes to be a good employee, to look at all the people around them that they're working with. I think it has a lot of potential, and we only go for 12 weeks. But these kids that are in middle school and in the beginnings of high school, I think we need more of that so that we can teach them about work ethic and jobs and what it takes and resumes and all the things that come with having in getting a job. So that's one thing that I know that I've been proud of, that the city council has been supportive of. And we have been working with the nonprofits to put people to work. We've started small, but I see this concept growing, hopefully every year, and that we will have companies that will come on board that will also, hopefully, the company and others that would employ 2 or 3 kids. Two kids going to summer for 12 weeks to give them something to do, work whether it's working in the lab, whatever the case is, wherever those folks want to use them. I think that's kind of a lot. I really do.
What are your 3 favorite cities that sort of have what you folks will need to do.
I mean, you have to, I was in Washington the other day, and I'm walking down the street in Georgetown, I look at Ike Bear, for those of you that are big shirt fans, it's a very high-end shirt company, and you look at the window and they have Milan, Paris, London, Charleston. And I'm like saying, wow. And so, Charleston, because my father and his family had a hotel down there in the 80s and the late 70s. If you went to downtown Charleston in the late 70s, early 80s, you would have said, my God, really? It was a pretty tough place. And see the transformation that has taken place in 40-some years has been incredible. Obviously, they've had a mayor that was there for 40 years, the longest serving mayor in America's history, I believe, with Joe Riley, and his vision. But I have to look at a city like Charleston and also a city like Savannah, because I think Savannah is another great city in the South. It's kind of the three sister cities. Hopefully Wilmington will be number one day. But Wilmington, Charleston, Savannah, I think are three of the most dynamic cities in America. But also, I've been to some great cities in Austin, Texas, Palo Alto, Boulder, Colorado. I mean, you've got some great communities. I will tell you, I think we have one of the great spots in the country. I think that for many years we held back on some investments that we should have been making. And I think now that we are making significant investments, especially in infrastructure, and I've seen what infrastructure improvements, we're able to transform downtown into a vibrant downtown, but I think into a downtown where people want to make significant investments. I think that you, as a community, you have to continue to look for ways, from a government perspective, to make some significant and targeted investments that will transplant into more business and more people wanting to come here, whether it be parks, infrastructure, your schools. Those are the things that government does do a good job in. And if they're done right, it can have a transformative effect not only on our city, but the entire region. And I've seen that happen. I think the Cross City Trail, one of the great investments this community has made. I'm very proud of that. Because I do believe that one day, and it doesn't matter wherever you go in this country, any city that's got any kind of population base is dealing with the same issue, traffic. We can't build roads fast enough. There's not enough money to build the roads that you're going to need. And I really do think that we're going to need to look for other ways to move around this community. I think the Cross City Trail is a great example of one. And I think public transportation is something that we're going to have to try to get right in the coming years. I think we're getting there, but I think that we need to take a public transportation system that's here, take it to there if you want to transform the community. And look, a lot of the millennials, look, when I got out of college, the first thing I want to do was buy me a fancy car. A lot of these kids don't want to do that. They want to go to a city that's got concerts, art, baseball stadiums, things to do at night, lively nightlife, and you can get around with Uber or public transportation. And you can go to all your dynamic cities in the country where a lot of young people are moving to, and they'll tell you that's what they've got going on. So I think we're in a very, remember, Wilmington's only 43 square miles. We're 10 square miles bigger than Manhattan. For those of you that never keep up with square miles. So when you fly over Manhattan, you still get this. Wilmington's 10 square miles bigger than that. Always fascinates me. But I think that you can have a good public transportation system here, move people around, and I think that these young people that want to move to your community want to move here for a lot of reasons. But you've got to have a very lively art community, good restaurants, good music, great parks, and people will come, and people like Adam and his company are going to make investments in communities that are investing in that type of stuff.
Can I add on to that? Years ago, decades ago, in economic development was really about that, elephant hunt you're talking about, the big recruitment, the industry. And there isn't anyone in this room that likes that kind of recruitment more than Becky does. I absolutely love it, love to work. But then, maybe a couple, 15, 20 years ago, economic development in communities began much more about asset-based development. Look at your assets and what can we do with those assets. And that's sort of how you developed or how you wanted to develop. What I'm reading more about these days, and I do some teaching in economic development, I talk a great deal more about it, is about placemaking. And if you look at Area Development Magazine, and they do a survey every year about what's important to business, and they rank the criteria, this year in the 30th survey, quality of life, and it was either third or fifth, is very important to businesses. And in the Citizen Competes tour that I talked about with the secretary, he talks about it as the white picket fence community. You know, whatever that is for you know, a community. This quality of life piece, and the mayor mentioned a great deal about that. For every community, quality of life could be a different thing. If you stand on the corner and you ask individuals, what is quality of life? It might be medical facilities, it might be, you know, a clean environment, it might be good schools, it might be arts and culture, it might be parks, you know, whatever. We all have a different idea, to some degree, about what quality of life. But all of us want to be in a place where there's quality of life. And if you relate quality of life to the placemaking idea of economic development, this is why communities and all the groups in the community, all the economic development groups, have to have a conversation together. Because you have to understand what quality of life is to the entire community. You can all have a different piece of how you carry out that quality of life. But if you're going to grow an economy and expand the economy, the quality of life piece is so critically important. And that is what political leadership, economic development leadership, community leadership can build, the placemaking part. What do you want your community to be? And then have a strategy, your marketing plan, whatever, have a strategy how you're going to make that place. Is it quick? No. I sat in front of a conference about a year ago, and was part of a panel, and one lady over here talked about the 10-year plan and how they methodically looked at that plan in a community, and the lady over here said, well, that'll take 10 years. And before I realized what I was doing, if I thought about it, I would have said it the way I said it. But I said, well, is that 10 years going to pass anyway? Don't you want to be contributing to your community and building that, you know, that sense of place, whatever it is for a community? That's what communities are about. That's what economic development groups are about. That's what a mayor and a council and a board of commissioner is about. And you've got to find ways to do it.
That's great. 10 years, that's nothing compared to our conversations about a convention center and a parking deck and lots of things that we talk about. Yeah, all the things we talk about here. Dr. Pat, I want to ask you one last question because I know we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. Wilmington lovingly refers to itself sometimes as the redheaded stepchild. Let me be the first one to say there's nothing wrong with being redheaded. But what does Raleigh want to hear from us? What do you know, when you think of Wilmington, and the reason that we call us that is because of the activity that happens around Raleigh and Charlotte. And we're down here in the southeast, we kind of get left out a little bit, or feel like we get left out. I'm not saying anything specific, but what do you want to hear from us? What do you want to know about Wilmington that would maybe cause us not to say that?
Excellent question. If you look at the Charlottes and the Raleighs, a little bit, you know, think about Winston-Salem or Asheville, the larger urban areas, you know, in the state, you are not going to stop urbanization. The young people that the mayor talked about, they want to go, you know, that sort of urban area, they want the lifestyle, no cars, you know, that sort of thing. That's going to happen. It's happening all over the country. It's happening, you know, in the world. So when Raleigh thinks about these areas, and in the area, and I work, 95% of my work is in rural communities, we want to hear, I want to hear, I think the governor wants to hear, the secretary wants to hear, everything you want to tell us about your community. Because don't assume we know about your community if you're down here and your economic developers are down here and you're not communicating with Raleigh. I will guarantee you, and I said this when I was associated with Advantage West, when it existed, and I was a local developer in Ashe County. My folks that I worked for in Ashe County complained about Advantage West never came up to Ashe County. So I asked the question one day, well, do we ever go to Asheville and participate with, Advantage West? Well, no. And, it's a two-way street. So I think communication, is a critical part of that. Because certainly, all of the leaders in Raleigh and those at the Department of Commerce certainly want to work with all of our areas. All of our areas are very, very different. So,
who do we communicate to? If we talk to Raleigh, you want us to send a message to Raleigh, who is it that we send that message to? I send it to David Rhodes or I send it to John Harden, and it gets into the Sync magazine, and that's kind of cool to have a Wilmington story in the wider North Carolina Department of Commerce newsletter. But who else should we be sending these stories to?
I would say be sending it to me as the Assistant Secretary with the Rural Division, and the way I work across the state, send it into the Secretary's office or to his Chief of Staff. If you have a complaint about something or want something done, the only way I ended up down here tonight is because Jenni invited me down here. So if Jenni hadn't invited me, I wouldn't be here tonight. So I think it's that two-way communication in a lot of different areas, whether it's for the same, newsletter, or it's to have Raleigh folks down here meeting with organizations so that we better understand what you want, what your political leadership wants, what your businesses down here want. For us sitting in Raleigh and y'all sitting down here and assume there's communication going on when there really isn't. That street, that road runs both ways, and I think it's more than one way of communication, Jim.
If I could answer that question too, I know that part of my role is to be the communicator from the region, to make sure that Commerce hears about the things that happen here, and that's really why I asked you the question, so that you could reiterate that. I have to send in ideas for stories each week. So if they're updating, I know it's daunting almost, because I have to make calls to people to ask them, hey, what's going on? I wish I didn't have to do that. I wish people would call me or put on Facebook or tweet out, something that's happening so that I can just pick up on it and send it in. And honestly, that's usually what I do. If I see something on Facebook, so all you people that I know that I see on Facebook, keep doing it, Emily Ann. but things like that, I want to hear that because I can help get it back to them as well.
And maybe our development folks should go like we did and meet with the partnership people, take them to lunch, keep them up to date on sites and buildings in their communities. And make that face-to-face relationship is so critical.
There's nothing wrong.
Just don't sit in your office back. You should be in Raleigh or now in Cary, meeting with economic partnership folks and keep them up to date with buildings and sites in their community.
Right, anything that's happening in our regions. Well, I want to, first of all, thank you guys again for your time, but I think we have 4 minutes for questions. I didn't mean to run over, but it was great. I wanted to be honest. So does anybody have any questions?
Most of the people I know and deal with are inner city, I'd say from Mayfair into the river. And what they fear or not fears in that way, what worries them is they think that time in the development, they get left out of the equation. The inner city development, the people feel they are being squashed and moved out, and they're more interested in the development coming in than what they are displacing. It's like the historic district is doing well, then all of a sudden air bed and breakfasts come in and squish it. And they don't feel that anybody addresses the problem. And the inner city, when you go and look like at the Coke plant, the people around it then start feeling that you're looking at their homes to take out and move in an upper crust. And they have no place to go. Affordable housing, I imagine, is probably all over the state, is a real problem. I mean, you bring somebody in and he's making $100,000. You hire somebody from here and he probably ends up as a janitor. because most of the children, most of the kids that are educated at UNCW do not stay here. And most of the kids that have any thought of moving up to $100,000 job, move out. So now you bring somebody else in, and that the inner city and the people who have lived here 30 years or longer, a lot of people feel that they're just being displaced, that they are being ignored in the development. They want progress, needless to say, but they want a progress that they don't feel is going to be a railroad car running over the town.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is a gentrification issue.
Yes.
And it does exist, and it exists in every city that is growing in America today. If you pick up the papers or you read online all of the different debates and discussions that they're having, and affordable housing is a very complex and complicated problem. It is. And being somebody that's in the development business, understanding what it takes to develop a lot, understanding the cost of land today, it's very challenging. And believe me, most of the builders and contractors, the vast majority, want to build affordable type units because they sell more. But it's pushing it further and further out because that's where the land is cheaper, but then it creates traffic congestion. So how do you fix it? I mean, obviously this has been an ongoing discussion and debate. I've got some ideas and thoughts. You know, I know in the state of North Carolina we don't have inclusive zoning, and I don't think we'll ever pass it. But I think there's things that you can do from a city and a county perspective where you can offer incentives to developers. In exchange for that, for some affordable units to be built in that development. For infrastructure, if the city wants to participate in some of the infrastructure development, parts of water, sewer, roads, curb gutter. But for that, we want a certain percentage of this to be housing. It's an option. And I think that's one thing that I think would incentivize some builders and developers to include some of that, if you allow for higher density. But then again, when you run into the proverbial not in my back neighbor, not in my backyard, you know, I like some density, I like some height, but I don't want it next to my neighborhood. It's going to destroy the neighborhood. So those are the issues that we contend with. Then the people that are living down here that want to stay in their houses, especially the senior citizens, what can we do as a community to keep them in those houses until they pass away or whatever they want to do, or they move on to something else? It's a tragedy when somebody wants to stay in the neighborhood but doesn't have the means to stay there to fix up their house. We see it quite often in city council meetings when we're having condemned properties. Somebody's passed away, the house is in disrepair, the neighbors complaining about it. We've got to take action on it. It's a tragedy that somebody can't pick up that house and keep and stay in that house, or have somebody in the community that wants an affordable unit to do it. I think it's going to probably take some government action, but I don't think it solely lies 100% on government. I think there's a responsibility for other groups that want to see affordable housing to also be able to raise some capital to be able to do it. I talked to Mayor Riley about this because they're running into the same problem in Charleston. Charleston has become such a high-end area that they're finding it very difficult to find workers to come work in the restaurants and in the hotels and in the shops down there because people are having to move 20 miles out to find affordable units, and then the traffic getting back in is horrendous. And yet, the average house in Charleston is now, especially the peninsula, is over $500,000. So they're trying to place it, but they're doing it piecemeal, 5 here, 4 there, 3 there. And that may be the way that we have to do it. And there's going to be some issues that me and Paul and the council are going to be discussing with our comprehensive land use plan and the code amendments that may afford us to be able to add additional units in the community. For example, garage apartments, which I'm a huge fan of. It allows somebody to live in a very nice neighborhood for, reasonable cost, usually behind the house. I see them all over Forest Hills. They work very well there. And I can't tell you the amount of young people that I've bumped into that rent them, and people that have started off their families in a garage apartment in Forest Hills. I think there's a way that you could add some density and affordability with that. But in respect to some of the issues that we're dealing with in the inner city, I think infrastructure improvements and then cleaning up areas, cleaning up the blight, and then trying to figure out ways to keep people in this home is strictly important because we want to see a diverse group of people in our community, in our city. We don't want to chase all groups of people out here, or a neighborhood that's been there for generations, because the price of real estate got so expensive that people, sold out and they're never coming back. It's a difficult issue that we're dealing with.
I've got something current for you, Mayor. I know you're a voter, and this is the Port City is an amazing place. It's a peninsula. We have the Atlantic, the Cape Fear River. I work in the marine industry, and I like to work on vessels between 50 and 150 feet. So my employer, Brother Jacques, gives me the ability to travel from Annapolis to Key West. So I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm very familiar with economic development, maritime based. So I'd like to bring something to the community here, maybe a maritime economic development consortium, that we could attract some of these larger vessels that I see in my travels that would be an economic force that could change the landscape. Much you saw with that haberdasher or tailor, London, Charleston. I have some things that I draw from in my world where in the furniture industry it was that same way. But boating is that way. It's going to be, points in Europe, New York, Wilmington, Miami. We have a big corridor out there where vessels are going north to south and vice versa. When they break, they can come right up the Cape Fear River and we can turn wrenches on them. We can fix their chillers. We can fix their diesel engines. I'm constantly looking for HR, folks that can turn torque wrenches, folks that can fix R13, R17 refrigeration units. I have no clue what that is, but I gotta hire them. So we need more of those guys. We work with the Cape Fear Community College. But I think the yachting community, it's not just specifically for the carriage trade. It's now these entrepreneurs are leasing out these mega yachts, super yachts. They need destinations. So if they could come up the river, we could give them Channery, we could give them a destination. We market it that way. I think it would be a good opportunity. So I'm letting something out of the bag here. Jenni knows about this, and I've just registered a name for North Carolina Maritime and Economic Development Consortium. Big mouthful.
It's very interesting that you bring this up, because I was just in Annapolis and happened to be eating in a restaurant, and it was Monday afternoon. Guys walked, in there. So what do you do? He says, I work on boats. I said, what do you do? He says, I do diesel engines and electronics for large vessels. He says, we work on about 70 mega yachts. They come into the Annapolis area. I mean, the number of, as you alluded to,
they want to come here,
it's
in the captain's
huge
quarter
industry here in the Chesapeake. And it should be something that we should take a look at here, because
make it happen.
we've got it here. Obviously, it's good that we see that another marina got built downtown.
Yeah, we got a great place to stow them when they come in.
Yeah,
Sure,
we've
absolutely.
got the marina right next to this building.
Yeah, we occupy the north side of the bridge, those guys on the south
South
side.
side of the bridge.
And
But the more
Chuck's
that,
been great.
the more of that, the merrier. I'm a firm believer that we need to go after that type of business, because it's out there.
I like to ask people, when was the last boat ride you had? And they go, geez, I couldn't tell you. But when you go into other markets, they say, well, we took a ride, we went to the Bahamas, or we went to Bermuda. And it's a big deal. I think it's a growing market. It's a growing economic driver. And we have the infrastructure here, both in the Cape Fear River and on the ICW, and all the navigation, all the ACONs have been serviced, and there's no shoaling. Come on, let's go, guys. So we just need a champion to make that happen. And then we need the folks that can do the work on them, the trained folks that come out of our educational facilities, that come from the triad to work. So.
I think that brings up a really good way to wrap this up. Because
Awesome.
You have this, thank you, Peter. So you have this organization that is not specific to overall economic development. It's more specialized, but it still fits in with the assets of this region.
It does.
So, as Dr. Pat was saying, not every organization needs to be focused on the exact same thing, but you have to know what your mission is, and then make it work and communicate with the other organizations. Find those other organizations that fit more closely to your mission and work together and communicate together so that we're getting somewhere. But knowing what the focus is in the region and aligning your mission to make that work. And one other thing I want to say about finding welders, we have this thing called NC Works. Please tell Will Collins that I said that. I gave him a plug. ncworks.org.gov, sorry, is the statewide database for jobs. So anybody looking for anybody that have a job, make sure you're registered. It's free, and that is a total free plug for another assistant secretary. I think I can wrap up now because I promised Dr. Pat that she would be on the road by 8 o'clock.
I really have one question,
Okay.
Mayor, before we wrap up.
Sure.
And you mentioned earlier some of the importance of the strategy that we've built over the last 50 years for economic development in the city. You mentioned some of the organizations, nonprofits, and all are quasi-funded by local government and county government. One of the questions that's been asked, and I've lived in this town now, in North Carolina, I've lived in this town for now 18 years, and I can honestly say, even though I'm involved with great organizations like CFEDC, that I have absolutely no knowledge, understanding, or could even articulate. And we know that most economic development, which I do, by the way, is word of mouth. It is one of the most important components. Like-minded businesses talk to other like-minded businesses and bring people into communities. PPD creates, AAI was an established company in this town for a long time, but PPD built on their reputation, and many other companies built on those reputations and drew from the workforce. I have no idea what the Wilmington strategy is or the county strategy is for economic development. Jay Garner has no idea, other than after being briefed, what our strategy was. I'm not sure anybody in this room, and I may be wrong, could tell us what our strategy, what our plan is for economic development, because we have no transparency. There's no public awareness. I can't think of the last time the WBD presented to the community what their goals are, what their benchmarks are, how they manifest themselves in terms of their recruiting strategy, what recruiting strategy they actually have, even if it's just land banking, how that strategy helps the economic development of this town and our county. So I think Jay Garner actually said specifically, critical that we be more transparent with the public about our economic development goals. Not just at the town level and the county level, but at the state level as well. And they're all mutually intertwined. And that the message that we send out with individuals that would attend a meeting like this tonight would be translated onto by word of mouth and translated in meetings and conferences and trade shows. But quite frankly, it's a well-kept secret.
Well, I'll say this, we did it for years. Wilmington Business Development, Northwood County, the Port Authority, North and State of Oklahoma, we marketed it.
You're the exception to the rule. You are the exception to the rule.
We did go.
You did. You did a great job.
And all over so that it is being done.
I was thinking more specifically about that, and I compliment you for the work that you have
I'm
done.
not bragging, I'm just talking about,
I understand. And you had a very specific plan, and I think it was a public plan, and a lot of people knew about it. But even you have changed your business model in Brunswick for a very specific reason. It's time for us to look beyond a traditional methodology that has been incorporated in this town for 55 years.
Well, first of all, the economic development organizations that we do fund do report to City Council. We do evaluate them. They are audited. We bring them before City Council in agenda briefing meetings, and we ask them to tell us what they are specifically doing. Whether you got that message or not, I don't know. But we feel happy enough with what they have been doing to do that. Now, if you have, you obviously feel that there should be more transparency in the process. That's not a problem. And one of the reports that came, one of the recommendations that came out was that from Garner, and I hope that we move forward on that. But remember, we're dealing with two different bodies. We're dealing with the county commissioners and the city council. And what we decided as a group, as elected officials, is we would agree on the things that we agree upon, and the ones that we don't have agreement on, we would work towards some sort of goal or resolution to those. So I think the first thing that came out of that Garner report, which is a significant amount of public investment, is water and sewer on 421. Because for many years we've been talking about bringing some companies up on that corridor, but for lack of water and sewer, we have not been able to do that. From an overall strategy, we've talked about that even with our economic development teams. And if it takes that we have to go outside to get some company that will help, I guess, get out into the world and say, this is what we are about, then that's something that's going to be a discussion, debate that we're all going to have. But I can tell you right now, it can't be just by the city of Wilmington. It's got to be by the city and the county, because together our voices and our monies make a much larger impact than if one of us speaks it all. So I think there's some merit to what you're saying, Ruth, I just feel that we've started this process last year. I think we've had some pretty good success with it. I think we should have been further on than we have been. We've got to go through election cycles, so people are concerned about different things from that. But I think that, you know, the report, I think, and I was one of the ones that supported that report with Woody, was tell us what we're doing good, tell us what we're doing bad, tell us what we need to be doing better. And I think that report did that. And I think the money that the county taxpayers spent in getting that report done, whether you liked it or not, and I think it upsets different groups in different parts of the community for different reasons, I think it was a good report. And I think that if we can go from that particular plan and just start going down that plan and start checking off the things that we need to do and should be doing, I think we'll be along pretty good. But I do think that we need to make sure that there's transparency, because I can tell you in different groups and different settings, when I talk about incentives, people think that I gave somebody money a week ago and they walked out the door. And people don't know. And I do agree that there needs to be more transparency in the process. Now, on the flip side of that, Mr. Bradshaw, you know, you deal with these companies, they come in here and they want secrecy, total secrecy in a lot of cases. And if you blow the lid off just a little bit, they're out of here. So there's some concern about that. That's why we work with these public-private partnerships, so that we can have some secrecy that was involved in dealing with some of these. Now, some people may not like that. They may want to see it all. But I think if you do it that way, you're not going to get any of the larger companies. I'm not saying you won't get any company, but you have some difficulties in some of that recruitment. So anyway, that's just some of the things that I run into when I'm dealing with economic development, because people come to me and say, well, what's going on here, what's going on there? And even me as the mayor, when I sit down in the economic development meeting with WBD, and they're going through a litany of different companies that they're talking to, all those companies are coded. I mean, I could be talking to Project Cobra. I don't know the company. Or you tell me what specifically the company does in regard to, is it pharmaceutical, is it transportation, whatever it is, but it is coded a certain way. But I don't even know as the mayor of the city.
Well, Joe Riley did something very important, and you heard about it when you first brought him out here, which is great.
You know, at the end of the day, the work that Jenni and I do is for the Adams of the world, so he can create quality jobs in a community, which also generates tax revenue, so the mayor can operate, you know, a city, and the commissioners can operate a county, so we can also serve the communities. At the end of the day, all of us are in it for the same thing, to enhance economies. But every one of us have to work at it differently. And we have different responsibilities, and the confidentiality thing of recruiting business, working with businesses is absolutely critical. You ever burn that confidentiality, you won't ever get it.
But there's a way of dealing with that. I was just going to say, Joe Riley did it in Charleston. He made the same, he didn't say that Boeing was coming, although they did talk about Boeing a great deal, by the way. It was a very public process, as everybody knows. As all the major manufacturers moved into South Carolina, it was all very public. Mind you, they did a lot of background work, and the reason they came to South Carolina, it was very specific to what South Carolina offered. Our state government has made it very clear that they are not going to offer those types of incentives. So those are off the table, and if they're on the table, no one in this room, I'm not even sure you would know about it at this point in time. But there is a way of talking about that world of development, keeping and maintaining the confidentiality clause, but talking about the opportunity and trying to define. Jim, you did it. You did it with some companies, and you were able to do it very well and excite a lot of people. You needed to bring the community together to get behind it without saying, hey, it's Continental Tire. And they're coming here, and guess what? You did it, and it can be done. Joe Riley proved that it can be done without divulging the name. We don't even know that these people came or even thought about coming here. We don't even know after the confidentiality agreement is gone or expired, or they chose another part of the state or another country, that they actually were looking at and why they were looking. So we could build on that information flow. That information simple flow would have created dialogue that we could say, well, we lost Continental, and we could go over to that new Japanese or Korean company and do the same thing. And I know the head chemist for that company, so I can talk to him about that. But we don't have that information. It's not readily available at the state level, it's not readily available at the regional level, and it's sure not available in our county and town. So, because I'm not sure anybody else knows, it's not shared. And Garner really made a specific point about doing that, and bringing it into the public, and getting the public involved in the process. We have not done that. It wasn't even on our short list. So,
Bruce, thank you for bringing that up, and I just want to stop because I really don't want to stop. I should be on the road at the time, and now she's never going to come back. But this is a great organization, and I've had interactions with lots of the board members, and I know several of them, but I have to say that dealing with Scott Johnson to put this together has been a dream. It's a very smart organization with a lot of good goals, a lot of good interaction, good conversations, and I hope that we continue to have more conversations like this.
Yeah, Jenny, just to add to that, that's the discussion we're having tonight is that transparency, that two-way street we're talking about. So us having it, doing it with others that want to have the conversation, it's important. So we appreciate you all for coming out this evening and look forward to connecting in the future with some more of our events and other events going on in the community. Thank representatives, we appreciate it.